When I walked into the courtroom, my daughter tried to declare me mentally incompetent to seize my $20 million fortune, so I pulled out the updated will and left everything to someone who actually valued me. The truth stings when you speak it aloud. Today, I am going to tell you something I never thought I would share, and if you, for even a second, feel that this sounds familiar, I ask you to leave a like and subscribe. It will help me continue unburdening myself. It's 7 o'clock in the morning in my Upper East Side townhouse, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floats through the kitchen, as it has every day for 40 years. The custom china mugs, the same ones I bought in upstate New York when my children were toddlers, wait neatly on the mahogany table that my late husband built with his own hands. The golden morning light filters through the lace curtains, creating those familiar patterns on the mosaic floor that once gave me peace. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 66 years old, and over the past 4 decades, I have built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, a fortune that now exceeds $20 million. This isn't inherited money. These aren't assets that fell from the sky. It is the result of getting up at 5 in the morning for 30 years to manage my 3 rental properties in Greenwich Village, of investing every extra cent in the stock market when nobody trusted that a widow could understand finance, of saving every last dime to purchase land that is worth millions today. But this morning, as I watch my daughter, Madison, slathering butter on her English muffin with that air of casual disdain that has always hurt me, I understand that everything I built has become my curse. "You're not in a position to make decisions anymore, Mom. You're losing your grip," Madison says without even lifting her gaze from her plate. Her words hit the table like stones in a pond, creating waves of pain that reach the pit of my chest. "Excuse me?" I manage to articulate, though my voice sounds strange, as if coming from far away. "You taught me to be practical, right? Let's be practical. The only reason you're still relevant is your portfolio." Time stops. The coffee cup in my hands begins to tremble, creating small ripples on the surface of the dark liquid. I look at my daughter, this 38-year-old woman, dressed in the navy designer suit I paid for, carrying the Italian leather bag that was my birthday gift, wearing those gold earrings she inherited from my mother, and I cannot recognize her. It is as if I am looking at a stranger who has invaded my kitchen, who has taken the place of the girl who once scampered through these very hallways begging for bedtime stories. The same girl I held in my arms for 3 nights straight when she had pneumonia at 5. The same one who cried in my lap when her first boyfriend stood her up at the movie theater door. "Madison, what are you saying?" I whisper, but the words come out broken, as if my throat has forgotten how to form coherent sounds. Next to her, her brother Ethan stares down at his eggs Benedict, concentrating on slicing the parsley into perfect little bits as if it were the most important task in the world. My youngest son, my baby who is now 35 and works in asset management, the one who was always shyer, gentler than his sister, the one who hugs me when I return from Sunday Mass and asks how I feel, but today, he doesn't defend me. Today, his silence is as painful as Madison's words. "We're taking you to a judge," my daughter continues, now looking directly at me, with those green eyes she inherited from her father, but which have never been so cold. "It's for the best. You're becoming forgetful. You're old. We need to protect you. From yourself." The word protect leaves her mouth with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. A grimace I've seen before in soap operas when the villain is about to reveal their wicked plan. I realize she is not worried about my well-being. She is planning my destruction. "Protect me," I repeat, and my voice now has a tremor I can't control. "Protect me from what, Madison? From squandering your estate? From getting scammed? From making stupid decisions?" She enumerates each reason as if it were a shopping list, without emotion, without pain, without love. "You need a legal guardian, and I am the only one who can take charge of your assets, your investments, your capital." Her words hit me like punches to the stomach. 1, 2, 3, each one more brutal than the last. My estate, my investments, my capital. As if I were a company to be liquidated, not a mother who gave them life. I have to get up from the table. Nausea rises in my throat like acid. I grip the back of the chair, the same chair where my late husband sat every morning reading the Wall Street Journal, where we had breakfast as a family for so many happy years, and I feel my legs won't support me. Is that what I am to you? I ask, though I already know the answer. A crazy old woman with money? Madison looks at me with that expression she used as a teenager when I denied her something she wanted. That mix of contempt and condescension that broke my heart then and shatters it now. No, Mom, you're a rich old woman, and soon you'll just be old. Her words resonate in the kitchen like a macabre echo. The same kitchen where I prepared their favorite meals for years, where I baked classic layered cakes for their birthdays, where I stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her with her college papers, where I counted my money dollar by dollar to pay for her business degree at Columbia because she wanted to attend a prestigious school. Ethan still says nothing. His silence is a betrayal that hurts more than his sister's poisonous words, because deep down I expected it from Madison. She was always ambitious. She always wanted more than I could give her. But Ethan was my emotional refuge. The son who called just to check in on my day. The one who brought me flowers on Mother's Day without being asked. But today he is there, immobile, complicit in his silence. I lock myself in the bathroom like a frightened child, like the fragile woman they believe I am. I sit on the edge of the tub where I bathed my children when they were small, where Madison played with her rubber duckies and Ethan made bubbles with the shampoo, the same hands that cared for them that now tremble uncontrollably. When did they become this? When did they stop seeing me as their mother and start seeing me as a walking bank account? At what point did my unconditional love transform into an asset they are ready to liquidate? The bathroom mirror reflects the image of a 66-year-old woman I don't recognize. Gray hair perfectly styled every week at the local salon, well cared for skin, without deep wrinkles thanks to the expensive creams I treat myself to every month. A body that stays agile from morning walks in Central Park. This is not the image of an incompetent woman. This is not the image of someone who has lost her mind. This is the image of a successful, independent woman who built a fortune, and now her own children want to snatch it away. As I look in the mirror, a cold certainty settles in my chest. I have to protect myself, because if I don't, no one else will. A week after that morning that split my world in two, a court notification arrives in my mailbox. The manila envelope with the seal of the Manhattan Surrogates Court seems to weigh more than all my years combined. My hands tremble as I tear the paper, as if I know that what is inside will change my life forever. Petition for guardianship and conservatorship due to mental incapacity. I read the words aloud in the solitude of my living room, where the only witness is the portrait of my late husband that looks at me from the mantelpiece with those kind eyes I miss so much. Madison had sued me so that the state could name her my legal conservator. With that legal designation, she could dispose of my bank accounts, my Greenwich Village properties, my stock market investments, even the cash I keep as an emergency reserve, everything I built during 40 years of work and sacrifice. The petition is drafted in technical language that is familiar to me because I myself have managed real estate contracts for decades. But reading my own name as the alleged incapacitated person gives me a dizzying sensation that forces me to sit down. According to the document, I present severe cognitive impairment, erratic behaviors, and risk of patrimonial dissipation. Cognitive impairment? Just yesterday, I reviewed the statements for my 3 rental apartments, calculated the inflationary adjustments to the contracts, and planned the investments for the next quarter. Erratic behaviors? The only erratic behavior was trusting that my children would love me for who I am, not for what I have. My estate was, indeed, considerable. A silent fortune I had built after being widowed at 40, when many women of my generation settled for the deceased husband's pension. But I had 2 small children and an iron will inherited from my mother, who ran a tiny bakery out of a storefront in Astoria, Queens, to support her 6 children. I started by buying the apartment where we lived with my husband's life insurance money. It was a modest place in Murray Hill, but it had a good location. I fixed it up myself. I learned to replace faucets, paint walls, and repair plumbing, because I didn't have money to pay for labor. When it was ready, I rented it and moved us to a smaller one. With that rent and my work as a secretary at a law firm, I saved for the second apartment. Thus, property by property, investment by investment. I built a real estate empire that today generates more than $35,000 a month just in rent. But I wasn't content with that. I studied the stock market, read finance books, learned about dividends and returns. When everyone said that cryptocurrencies were a fad, I invested a small amount in Bitcoin that is worth 10 times more today. I never wanted to flaunt it. I still live in the same Upper East Side house I bought 15 years ago. I drive my well-maintained 2015 Toyota Camry until it falls apart. And my greatest luxury is the salon on Fridays. But I had over $20 million in properties, investments, and cash. And now, my own daughter wanted to steal it from me, using the law as her accomplice. I call Ethan with the desperation of a mother trying to save herself from shipwreck by grabbing onto any floating plank. His phone rings 5 times before he answers with that distracted voice he uses when he's at the office. "Hello, Mom. I'm in a meeting. Can this be quick?" "Ethan, your sister sued me. She says I'm crazy, that I can't handle my money, that I need a guardian." The words rush out, as if I'm afraid he'll hang up before I can explain the magnitude of the betrayal. Silence. A silence so long that for a moment I think the call has dropped. "Ethan, are you there?" "Yes, Mom. I'm here." His voice sounds odd, strained. "Look, maybe Madison has a point. Lately you've been different." "Different how?" I ask, though I feel I no longer want to hear the answer. "I don't know, Mom. More distracted. The other day you came to my house and didn't remember we were supposed to meet an hour later. And when we went to the bank, you struggled to remember your PIN. Every word is a stab wound. I didn't remember we were supposed to meet an hour later. I arrived early because I was excited to see him. I struggled to remember my PIN. I hesitated for 2 seconds because I had changed the number for security and hadn't yet automated it. But in my children's minds, those small human moments had become evidence of my mental incapacity. "Ethan, you know I'm not crazy. You know I handle my finances better than many businessmen." My voice cracks despite my efforts to keep it firm. "Mom, nobody says you're crazy, but maybe you need help. And Madison is willing to help you." The word help, pronounced like that, with that paternalistic condescension, hurts me more than a direct insult. I realize I have lost both my children in different but equally devastating ways. Madison betrayed me out of ambition. Ethan betrayed me out of cowardice. That afternoon, I lock myself in my study, surrounded by the files that document every transaction, every investment, every financial decision I have made over the last 20 years. Invoices organized by date, updated rental contracts, investment account statements that show constant growth year after year. Is this the evidence of a deteriorated mind? This meticulous record of a woman who transformed her husband's life insurance into a respectable fortune? I make a decision that will change everything. I am going to defend myself, but not just legally. I am going to protect my estate in a way my children will never expect. I called George Sterling, my trusted attorney for 30 years. He was the one who helped me with the purchase of my first investment property, who drafted my rental contracts, who advised me when I decided to diversify my capital into the stock market. A man of 68, with completely white hair and an honesty that has become rare in his profession. "Eleanor, how are you? I heard what's happening." His voice conveys that genuine concern I no longer hear from my own children. "George, I need to update my will. Urgently." "Are you sure?" "It's a major decision, and with the lawsuit pending, more sure than I've ever been in my life," I interrupt. "And I want the new primary beneficiary to be Teresa Ruiz." Teresa Ruiz. The name leaves my lips like a prayer. My former housekeeper for 20 years, who left 3 years ago when her mother fell ill with diabetes in a small town in upstate Maine and needed constant care. A woman of 55, with hands rough from hard work, but a heart softer than any silk. The only person who, for 2 decades, treated me with unconditional love, expecting nothing in return but a fair salary and human respect. When I was sick, because even strong women get sick, Teresa slept on the couch in my bedroom to check on me during the night. When I had hip surgery 5 years ago, she was the one who helped me bathe for 3 months without ever making me feel invalid or dependent. When I turned 60 and my children forgot to wish me well, Teresa arrived with a homemade layered cake and sang happy birthday in my kitchen. Teresa never asked me for a raise. She never asked to borrow money. She never manipulated me emotionally. When she left to care for her mother, she cried more than I did. And since then, she calls me every Sunday just to ask how I am, how I feel, if I need anything. Isn't that love? Isn't that what a daughter should do for her mother? Teresa Ruiz? Your housekeeper? George can't hide his surprise. Not my housekeeper, George. The woman who cared for me like a daughter for 20 years. The only person who never saw me as a walking bank account. The tears I have been holding back finally start to roll down my cheeks. If my biological children don't love me, I'm at least going to leave my fortune to someone who did. That afternoon, while George drafted the new will, I think about the irony of the situation. My children are fighting over an estate that will no longer be theirs. They are planning my incapacity to seize an inheritance that is about to change beneficiaries. The humble woman who washed my dishes for 20 years will be a multimillionaire. And my children, who consider me a burden, are going to discover that burdens don't leave inheritances to those who mistreat them. For the first time in weeks, I smile. 2 weeks pass like an eternity. Every day I open my eyes in bed, the first thing I think about is the court date approaching like an inevitable storm. Every morning, while preparing my coffee in the kitchen that was once my refuge and now feels like a battlefield, I relive Madison's words. The only reason you're still relevant is your portfolio. But it's the small betrayals that hurt the most. The ones no one sees, the ones that don't appear in any court petition, the ones that accumulate like drops of poison until the heart becomes immune to pain. Last Tuesday was my 66th birthday. I woke up early, as always, and set the table for 2 out of habit. For 25 years, Ethan had come to have breakfast with me on my birthday. It was our tradition. He would arrive with red carnations, my favorites, and I would prepare custom waffles with whipped cream, exactly how he liked them since childhood. I waited until 11 in the morning. The waffles grew cold on the plate. The flowers I had bought myself, just in case, wilted in the vase. My phone remained silent, even though I checked it every 5 minutes like a teenager waiting for a first love's call. At noon, I called his office. His secretary told me he was in meetings all day. At 3, I called again. He was having lunch with clients. At 6, I tried one more time. He's gone for the day, Mrs. Hayes. Would you like to leave a message? Tell him his mother had a birthday, I murmured before hanging up. That night, as I ate the chicken noodle soup I had prepared for 2 alone, a WhatsApp message arrived. Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, work is crazy. I'll call you tomorrow. He never called. But if that was painful, what happened on Friday was devastating. Madison arrived at my house unannounced, just like when she was a teenager and thought the world belonged to her. She carried a manila folder under her arm and that fake smile she reserves for when she wants something. She sat on the sofa in the living room where her father used to read the paper on Sundays, crossing her legs with that studied elegance she learned at the country club I enrolled her in when she turned 15. Mom, I've come to propose something, she said, opening the folder with calculated movements. We can avoid all this courtroom drama. You give me power of attorney over your accounts and properties, and I handle everything. I'll give you a monthly allowance for your expenses. $50,000 a month. It's more than you need. $50,000. Out of the more than $150,000 my properties generate each month, plus the returns on my investments. She was offering me a poverty pension in exchange for my entire estate. And if I get sick? I asked, pretending to consider her proposal while my blood ran cold inside. If I need surgery? If I want to travel? That's what I'm here for, Mom. I decide which expenses are necessary and which are not. You don't have to worry about money anymore. The word decide resonated in my head like a gunshot. She would decide if I deserved expensive medicine. She would decide if I could replace my car when it broke down. She would decide every aspect of my life, as if I were a small child who doesn't know what's best for her. And if I say no? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her smile hardened into a threatening grimace. Then we proceed with the lawsuit. And when I win, because I will win, Mom, you won't even have that $50,000. You'll have whatever I decide to give you. She rose from the sofa with the predatory grace of someone who knows she holds all the cards. Before leaving, She paused at the living room door and uttered the words that finished destroying what little was left of my maternal heart. You should be grateful, Mom. Not all daughters would take care of a mother who is so complicated. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, looking at the photographs on my nightstand. Madison at 5, with her messy pigtails, hugging the stuffed puppy I bought her at the local street fair. Ethan at 8, his soccer uniform stained with mud after his first game, smiling with 2 missing teeth. When did those innocent children turn into these calculating adults who see their mother as an obstacle to their prosperity? I got up and went to my study, where I keep all the memories of their childhood. Achievement diplomas I signed as a proud mother. Drawings they made for me on Mother's Day. Letters they wrote when they went to camp, telling me how much they missed me. Mommy, you are the best mom in the world. I love you so much. Maddie. Mom, thanks for taking care of me when I was sick. You are very pretty and very good. Ethan. Reading those letters written in the shaky handwriting of children who truly loved me, I started to cry as I hadn't cried since my husband's funeral. It wasn't just sadness. It was a sense of loss so profound it hurt to breathe. It was as if I had buried my children years ago without realizing it. And these adults who bore their names were cruel imposters sent to torture me. But in the middle of that emotional darkness, my phone rang. It was a number from upstate Maine. Teresa. Mrs. Eleanor, how are you? I haven't called in 2 weeks because my mom was very sick, but she's better now. Her warm voice crossed the distance like a hug. For the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. Teresa, sweetheart, how are you? How is your mom? We're getting by, ma'am. Fighting the good fight. But tell me, you sound sad. Teresa always had that ability to detect my emotions over the phone. 20 years of living together had taught her to read my silences, my sighs, the small variations in my voice that revealed when something wasn't right. I told her everything. The lawsuit, my children's betrayal, Madison's humiliating proposal, my forgotten birthday. Teresa listened without interrupting, making those small sounds of understanding that women make when another woman tells us her pain. Oh, Mrs. Eleanor, she sighed when I finished speaking. I never understood your children. You gave them everything, you educated them, you paid for the best schools, and this is how they repay you. Do you think I'm crazy, Teresa? Do you think I can't handle my money anymore? Are you crazy? She laughed with that frank laugh I missed so much. Ma'am, you are the smartest woman I know. When I worked for you, I watched you manage your investments better than any banker. You knew exactly how much you spent on the house, how much came in from rent, how much you had in each account. Neither crazy nor anything. Her words were like medicine for my wounded soul. Here was a woman with a grade school education who had earned a living cleaning other people's houses, telling me truths that my college-educated children refused to acknowledge. Teresa, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, I said, taking a deep breath. If I left you something in my will, would you accept it? Silence. A silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Ma'am? I'm here, Teresa. Mrs. Eleanor, you don't owe me anything. I worked for you. You paid me. We're even. We are not even, Teresa. You gave me something money can't buy. You gave me respect. You gave me affection. You treated me like a person, not an employer. And now, when my own children treat me like a hindrance, I need to ensure my estate goes to the hands of someone who truly appreciated me. Oh, ma'am, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything now. Just think about it. But I want you to know that I already changed my will, and part of my assets are going to be yours. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Not because I had solved my problems, but because I had found a way to turn my greatest pain into my greatest revenge. My children wanted my money without giving me love. Well, my money was going to go to the one who had loved me without asking for anything in return. The next day, I called George to finalize the last details of the will. The legal battle was about to begin, but I had already won the emotional war. The day of the hearing arrived with a cold rain beating against the windows of the surrogate's court like desperate tears. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not because I had set the alarm, but because my body no longer remembered how to sleep peacefully. My hands trembled as I dressed in the navy business suit I had bought especially for this occasion. I wanted the judge to see a serious, capable woman, not the demented old woman Madison had portrayed in her petition. I ate breakfast alone, like every morning for the past month. Toast with strawberry jam, black coffee, and that empty feeling in my stomach that I no longer knew if it was hunger or anxiety. In my purse, I carried the new will that George had finished the previous week, along with all the documents proving my mental capacity, updated bank statements, renewed lease agreements, even the annual tax returns that I had reviewed line by line myself. The cab dropped me off in front of the gray concrete building where my fate would be decided. I walked down the halls that smelled of disinfectant and despair, passing other destroyed families waiting their turn for a judge to decide who had the right to what. Elderly people accompanied by children who looked at them impatiently, women crying on wooden benches, men in expensive suits consulting their watches as if time were more valuable than human dignity. Madison was already waiting in the hearing room, dressed in a pearl gray suit I recognized immediately. I had given it to her last year for her birthday, when I still believed mothers bought their children's love with expensive gifts. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and she wore an expression of confidence that churned my stomach. Beside her, her lawyer, a man in his 50s with the face of a well-fed shark, reviewed documents with the calmness of someone who knows the law is on their side. Ethan entered 5 minutes later, nervous, avoiding my gaze like a child who knows he's about to be scolded. He sat behind Madison, not with me, and that silent betrayal hurt more than any cruel word. My younger son, the one who used to hug me when he had nightmares, had chosen the side of the one who wanted to destroy me. The judge was a man in his 60s, with a gray beard and glasses that gave him the air of a tired sage. His name was Judge David S. Reynolds, according to the plaque on his desk. And for a moment I fantasized that his age would give him the wisdom to understand the difference between a vulnerable mother and a strong woman being attacked by her own family. The hearing began with Madison presenting her case. Her voice sounded sweet, concerned, like the perfect daughter she never was. She spoke of episodes of confusion, erratic financial decisions, and concern for my well-being. Every word was a lie wrapped in false affection, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from shouting the truth in front of everyone present. My mother, Your Honor, is a woman who deserves respect and care at this stage of her life, she said while I looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and horror. As a responsible daughter, I cannot allow the circumstances of age to put her at financial or personal risk. Her lawyer presented a list of evidence that chilled my blood. According to them, I had forgotten to pay the property tax on one of my properties last year. What they didn't mention is that I paid it 2 days after the deadline because I was at the hospital accompanying Teresa when her mother had surgery. They had documented that I took longer than usual to find the keys in my purse. As if every human being on the planet hasn't wasted time searching for keys at some point in their life. The cruelest part was when they presented a secretly recorded video during my last visit to Ethan's house. In the footage, I appeared asking 3 times what time family dinner was. What the video didn't show was that I had just received the lawsuit notification, and my mind was completely scattered by the emotional shock. Anyone in my situation would have been distracted. As you can observe, Your Honor, Madison's lawyer continued with that smooth voice predators use disguised as lambs, Mrs. Hayes shows clear signs of cognitive decline that put a considerable estate at risk, including properties valued at over $15 million, stock market investments, and liquid assets that could be targeted by unscrupulous scammers. It pained my soul to hear my estate reduced to cold numbers in the mouths of strangers. Those properties represented years of early mornings, sacrifices, and dreams fulfilled brick by brick. Those investments were the result of entire nights spent studying financial reports, of calculated decisions that had multiplied my capital when other widows of my generation depended on family charity. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up with all the dignity I could muster. I pulled out my own documents, updated bank statements, recently renewed contracts, even notes from my meetings with investment advisors, and presented them methodically. Your Honor, I began in a firm voice, over the past 2 years, I have increased my net worth by 15%. I have renewed all my lease agreements with inflation-adjusted increments, and I have diversified my investments, including a small position in cryptocurrencies that has generated excellent returns. Does this seem like the behavior of an incompetent woman? The judge reviewed my documents carefully. I could see in his eyes that he was beginning to doubt the version Madison had presented. How do you explain the episodes your daughter describes, Mrs. Hayes? Your Honor, my daughter confuses emotional distress with mental incapacity. Since she sued me, I have been deeply hurt and sometimes distracted. But being heartbroken is not the same as being insane. Then I pulled out my secret weapon, the new will. Furthermore, Your Honor, I wish to inform the court that I have updated my last will and testament. I have decided to modify my beneficiaries, leaving the majority of my estate to Teresa Ruiz, a woman who cared for me for 20 years with genuine love. The silence in the room was deafening. I watched Madison's face transform from confidence to absolute panic. Her lawyer urgently whispered something in her ear. Ethan looked at me with wide eyes, as if he had just understood for the first time the real consequences of his betrayal. Teresa Ruiz? The judge asked. My former housekeeper, Your Honor. A humble woman who never asked me for anything and who treated me with more respect and affection than my own children. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then he directed his attention to Madison, whose mask of concerned daughter had completely disappeared, replaced by an expression of pure rage. Ms. Hayes, the judge said, how do you explain that a supposedly incompetent woman has made such a specific and calculated decision regarding her will? And how do you explain that she continues to successfully manage a considerable investment portfolio? Madison stammered. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't have a manipulative answer ready. Your Honor, the will is precisely evidence of her mental confusion. What sane mother would leave her fortune to an employee instead of her children? A mother who has been betrayed by those children, I responded immediately. A woman who prefers to reward authentic love rather than compensate ambition disguised as filial concern. The judge's gavel hit the desk like a shot. Petition dismissed. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes demonstrates full mental and legal capacity to manage her assets. Case closed. Madison rose from her seat like a fury. Her green eyes, so similar to her father's but devoid of his kindness, looked at me with a hatred I will never forget. You're crazy, she yelled at me in front of the entire court. You are completely insane if you think I will forgive you for this. The only mistake I made, I replied with a calm that surprised even myself, was believing that a mother's love could buy a daughter's love. I left the courthouse with my dignity intact, but my heart shattered. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost my children forever. Or maybe, I thought as the taxi took me back to my home, maybe I never truly had them. That night, I called Teresa to tell her what had happened. She cried so much that I had to comfort her instead of seeking comfort for myself. Mrs. Eleanor, I can't accept that. It's too much. Teresa, my dear, you already gave me more than money can buy. Now let me give something to you. For the first time in months, I fell asleep smiling. The days after the trial passed in a strange silence, like the one that follows a devastating storm. My house, which had always been full of the noise of phone calls, unexpected visits, and the constant coming and going of my children asking for favors, now held an absolute quiet that at first frightened me, and then began to feel liberating. No more WhatsApp messages from Madison asking me to transfer money for an emergency that always turned out to be an expensive whim. No more calls from Ethan asking if he could borrow money for his consulting business that never generated the promised profits. No more Sunday visits that had become emotional blackmail sessions disguised as family dinner. For the first time in decades, my Sundays completely belonged to me. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Walk leisurely through Central Park, not as a routine exercise, but as a walk of discovery. I sat on a bench under a blooming cherry tree and watched the families playing on the lawn. Children running after soap bubbles. Young couples sharing ice cream cones with impossible flavors. Grandparents pushing strollers while parents took photos. When was the last time my children had invited me to a park? When had they wanted to spend time with me without money being involved? I couldn't remember, and that amnesia was more revealing than any medical test. A woman my age sat next to me on the bench. Her hair was dyed an artificial but elegant blonde, and she carried a market bag full of fresh vegetables. "Isn't it a beautiful day?" she said, smiling with that spontaneous warmth that only exists between strangers with no hidden agenda. "Yes, very beautiful," I replied, and I realized it had been weeks since I had had a casual conversation with someone who didn't want something from me. "I've been coming here every Sunday since I was widowed," she continued. "At first it was because I felt so lonely in my house. Now I come because I like it. Do you have family nearby?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How to answer? Do I have 2 children who sued me to steal my money? Do I have family who would rather see me dead than independent? "It's complicated," was all I could manage to say. She nodded with that wisdom that comes from years and disappointments. "Family is always complicated. I have 3 daughters. One lives in California and calls me every Sunday religiously, but only to tell me her problems. Another lives here in the city but is so busy with her career that she barely sees me at Christmas. The third only shows up when she needs money." Her words comforted me in a strange way. I was not the only mother in the world who had confused giving with loving, who had raised children incapable of emotional reciprocity. "And what do you do?" I asked her. "What I can do. I live my life. I signed up for painting classes at the cultural center. I volunteer teaching children to read at a library. I travel with a group of widowed friends. I don't wait for my daughters to make me happy. I seek my own happiness." That conversation planted a seed in my mind. For 66 years, I had defined my identity through my role as a wife first, mother second. Who was Eleanor Hayes when she wasn't serving others? What did she want to do with the rest of her life, now that her children had made it clear they didn't want to include her in theirs? I arrived home with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I went to my study and took out a new notebook, one of those I had bought with good intentions but always ended up stored in drawers. On the first page, I wrote, "Life Plan for Eleanor, January 2024. Point 1. Travel to Italy." I had always wanted to see the land of my grandparents, but every time I mentioned the idea, my children found reasons to dissuade me. "It's too dangerous to travel alone at your age, Mom. Why spend so much money on tourism? What if something happens to you there?" Now I realized they weren't worried about my safety. They were worried that I would spend my money on my happiness. Point 2. Play the piano. I had taken lessons as a child, before family poverty forced my mother to swap music lessons for part-time work. For years I had fantasized about resuming classes, but there was always something more important: paying for the children's college, fixing the car, covering some family emergency. Point 3. Do something meaningful with my estate. Not just leave it to Teresa in my will, but create something that had a real impact while I could see and enjoy it. That night I called 3 places: a travel agency, a music school, and my bank. It was time to stop living for others and start living for myself. My children's response was not long in coming. On Wednesday afternoon, Ethan showed up at my door with a bag of pastries from a local bakery and that expression of a repentant child he had perfected since age 5. He was wearing a light blue shirt that looked especially good on him, and for a moment my maternal heart softened at the sight of my baby standing on my doorstep. "Mom, can we talk?" His voice sounded genuinely hurt, vulnerable, like when he was little and came to apologize after a mischief. I let him in, against my better judgment. He sat on the living room sofa where he had grown up, where he had watched cartoons on Saturday mornings while I made chocolate chip pancakes. For a moment, the present disappeared, and I only saw the child he had been, the son I had loved unconditionally. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything that happened. Madison convinced me it was best for you, but I realized I was wrong." The words came out with that sincerity I wanted to believe, that I needed to believe. "Do you realize, Ethan, that your sister tried to rob me? Do you realize they treated me like I was insane?" "I know, Mom. I know, and I feel terrible. Madison can be very persuasive, but I never wanted to hurt you. You are my mother. I love you." Those 3 words, "I love you," resounded in my heart like music after months of silence. How long had it been since one of my children had told me they loved me without asking for something in return? "I want to fix things with you, Mom. I want us to be family again. We can start over, right?" I nodded, feeling tears begin to sting my eyes. Maybe I had misjudged Ethan. Maybe he had been a victim of Madison's manipulation as much as I had. Maybe, "Can I ask you a favor, Mom? Can I stay tonight? Like when I was a kid and was scared. I just want to be close to you." And like the foolish mother I had always been, I said yes. That night we ate dinner together in the kitchen. I prepared his favorite dish, chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes. And we talked as we hadn't in years. He told me about his work, about his plans, about a girl he liked in the office. He asked for advice. He made me laugh. For the first time in months, I went to sleep feeling that maybe I hadn't lost all my children. I woke up at 6 in the morning to a strange noise in my study. At first, I thought it was a cat that had entered through a poorly closed window, but when I got up to investigate, I found Ethan rummaging through my papers with urgent, desperate movements. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He froze like a thief caught red-handed. In his hands were copies of my bank documents, information about my investments, and, most painfully of all, a photograph of my new will that he had taken with his phone. "Mom, this is not what it looks like." But I knew exactly what it was. My son had come to my house not to reconcile with me, but to gather information he could use against me in a future legal battle. He had feigned filial love to gain access to my private documents. "Get out of my house," I told him with a calm that surprised me. "Mom, let me explain. Get out of my house." He ran out like the coward he had always been, leaving behind the last fragments of my maternal heart. That morning, I made 2 decisions that would change my life forever. First, I changed all the locks on my house. Second, I called Teresa to tell her I wanted to visit her in upstate Maine. It was time to stop looking for family in those who shared my blood and start building it with those who shared my heart. The trip to the small town in upstate Maine became my first act of real rebellion against the life others had designed for me. As the first-class bus crossed the American Northeast landscape, sitting by the window with a book I had wanted to read for years, and no one had let me finish, I realized this was the first time in decades I was making a decision based solely on my happiness. Teresa was waiting for me at the terminal with a bouquet of wildflowers and that immense smile that lit up her whole face. At 55, she retained the energy of a woman who had worked all her life but had never lost the capacity to be astonished by good things. She hugged me with that genuine strength that only comes from people who hug because they want to, not because they have to. "Mrs. Eleanor, I can't believe it. You here in my neck of the woods," she said as she led me toward a battered but clean taxi. "My mom is thrilled. She keeps saying she's going to meet the kind lady I've talked so much about." Teresa's house was small but impeccable, painted light blue with pots full of red geraniums in every window. The yard had a small bird feeder surrounded by candles and fresh flowers, and in the back, an apple tree that shaded a plastic table where much of the family life likely unfolded. Doña Carmen, Teresa's mother, was a tiny woman of 78 with lively eyes and hands deformed by arthritis, but still moving gracefully when she served coffee. She welcomed me as if I were a daughter returning after a long time, and for the first time in months, I felt truly welcome somewhere. "Look, Doña Eleanor," she said as she served me black coffee in a ceramic mug. "Teresa has told me everything that happened with your children. And I tell you, sometimes the children you bear are not the children the heart needs. God sends us the family we need, not always the one we expect." Her words, spoken with the wisdom of someone who had raised 7 children in poverty but had never lost faith in love, touched me deeper than any psychological therapy. That night, I slept in Teresa's guest room, a simple room with a wrought iron bed and walls decorated with family photographs, and rested as I hadn't in years. During the week I spent in Maine, I lived a completely different life. I woke up to the sound of roosters, not the anxiety of checking my phone for messages that never came. I had breakfast in the yard under the apple tree, listening to Doña Carmen's stories about her youth on a ranch where money was scarce, but love was abundant. I accompanied Teresa to the local market, where vendors greeted her by name, and she introduced me as Mrs. Eleanor, my other mother. My other mother. Those words resonated in my heart for days. One afternoon, while helping Teresa fold laundry in her small makeshift laundry room in the yard, I told her my plan. "Teresa, I want to do something important with my money. something meaningful. I've thought about creating a foundation for women like us, women who have been left alone and need to bet on themselves. Oh, ma'am, do you think I can help with something like that? I don't know anything about foundations or those important things. You know more than anyone what it means to start over, what it means to care with genuine love, what it means to value people for who they are and not for what they have. That is exactly what I need for this project. During that week, we began to shape what would become the Mother's Hands Foundation, a space where women over 50 could receive job training, emotional support, and above all, dignity. Teresa provided the practical experience of someone who had navigated poverty with grace. I provided the financial resources and the determination to create something bigger than my personal pain. And your children, ma'am? Won't they get even angrier when they find out you're spending their inheritance on this? Teresa, my dear, it is no longer their inheritance. They chose money over love. Now I choose who I give both to. I returned to New York transformed. I was not the same vulnerable woman who had fled her own house a week earlier. I was a woman with purpose, with a clear mission, and with the certainty that I deserved more than the emotional crumbs my children were willing to give me. Madison and Ethan's response to my new plans was as predictable as it was devastating. 3 days after my return, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a different lawyer than the one who had represented Madison in the hearing. Mrs. Hayes, I am attorney Gustavo Rivas. I represent your children, Madison and Ethan Hayes. They have hired me to inform you that they are going to contest your will under the figure of emotional and patrimonial injury. They consider that your recent decisions regarding the disposition of your assets constitute a form of vengeance that violates legitimate hereditary rights. Emotional injury? I asked, feeling hysterical laughter rising in my throat. They sued me to declare me incompetent, tried to steal my estate, and now they talk about emotional injury? Ma'am, I suggest you hire legal representation. They are serious this time. I hung up the phone and immediately called George. Eleanor, legally, they don't have solid ground, my trusted lawyer reassured me. A will cannot be contested based on emotional injury. You are in full possession of your faculties. You can dispose of your estate as you please. But they are going to make a lot of media noise. They will try to paint you as a cruel mother who abandons her children. Let them try, George. I no longer care what people think. I care about doing what is right. But that same afternoon, I discovered that my children had gone beyond legal threats. I arrived home after my meeting with the accountant who was helping me structure the foundation, and I found a reporter from a sensationalist TV show waiting for me at my doorstep. A young woman with too much makeup and a predatory smile that painfully reminded me of Madison. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Sarah Jennings from Real Life Scandals. Your children contacted us to tell their story. According to them, you have abandoned your family to leave your inheritance to a domestic employee. What do you have to say about that? I froze. My own children had sold our family tragedy to the sensationalist media, turning my pain into mass entertainment. No comment, I managed to articulate before retreating into my house. That night, the program aired. Madison appeared on screen dressed in black, with perfectly calculated tears, talking about an estranged mother who had forgotten the love her children gave her because of a manipulative employee who had taken advantage of her emotional vulnerability. Ethan, for his part, played the role of the hurt son who only wanted to protect his mother from poor decisions she might regret. He spoke of my progressive isolation, my mood swings, and his genuine concern for my well-being. They never once mentioned the lawsuit for incompetency. They never acknowledged that they had betrayed me for money. They never admitted that for years they had treated me like a walking ATM with feelings. On screen, they were the perfect children fighting against a deranged mother. In reality, they were two manipulative adults who had lost access to my fortune and now wanted to destroy my reputation as revenge. That night, I cried for them one last time, not from pain, but from grief. I was finally laying to rest the children I had loved, accepting that the people they had become deserved neither my love nor my money. The next day, I made 2 important calls. The first, to Teresa, to tell her to fast-track the foundation plans. The second, to a public relations agency. If my children wanted a media war, I had the resources to give them one. But this time, It would be on my terms. It was time for the world to know the complete truth of my story. The PR agency I hired was not just any firm. Sterling and Associates had a reputation for managing reputational crises for politicians and CEOs, people accustomed to fighting media battles with millions of dollars at stake. When I explained my situation, the director, a woman in her 40s in impeccable suits and a smile that promised victory, looked at me with genuine respect. "Mrs. Hayes, your case is perfect for changing the narrative. A successful woman defending herself against opportunistic children. The American public loves stories of betrayed matriarchs who stand up for themselves." Within a week, we had the strategy ready. First, an exclusive interview on the country's most watched national morning show, where I would tell my complete version of events. Second, a press release detailing the creation of the Mother's Hands Foundation with an initial investment of $8 million. Third, Teresa's testimony about the 20 years she worked for me and how she saw me build my estate with dedication and sacrifice. What your children failed to understand, Mrs. Hayes, is that you have credibility. You have measurable results, properties, successful investments, a lifetime of honest work. They only have crocodile tears and unsubstantiated accusations. The interview aired on a Tuesday morning. I sat opposite Diane Lawson, one of the most respected anchors on American television, dressed in a navy suit that projected seriousness and success. I wasn't going as the heartbroken victim my children had portrayed, but as the businesswoman I was, the woman who had multiplied her capital for decades. "Eleanor, tell us your version of this story that has gripped the nation." And I told everything, without melodrama, without tears, with the coolness of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. I explained how I had built my fortune brick by brick after being widowed. I showed documents proving my mental and financial competence. I detailed every betrayal, every manipulation, every lie my children had used to try and appropriate my estate. "I want to make it clear," I said, looking directly into the camera, "that I did not abandon my children. They abandoned me when they decided my money was more important than my dignity." Then came the most powerful moment of the interview. Diane played snippets of the program where Madison and Ethan had defamed me, and I responded point by point with legal documents, audio recordings, and evidence that proved their lies. "Madison says you have changed, that you are no longer the mother they knew." "You're right, Diane. I am no longer the mother they knew. I am no longer the woman who bought love with money, who confused generosity with weakness, who allowed myself to be treated as an ATM with feelings. I am a woman who learned to value herself." The interview's ratings broke records. For 3 days, my name trended on social media. Thousands of women shared their own stories of ungrateful children, of families that had financially exploited them, of mothers who had confused giving everything with giving up. I Am Eleanor became a movement. Women across the country uploaded videos telling how they had rebuilt their lives after being betrayed by those they loved most. The hashtag reached millions of views, but the most satisfying thing was watching the narrative change. Comments on social media that had previously supported my children now pointed to them as the real villains of the story. How dare they sue their mother for incapacity and then complain when she takes away the inheritance? This woman worked her whole life just to be betrayed by her kids for money. I wish my mom had Eleanor's courage to stand up for herself when we treated her badly. Madison's response was exactly what we expected. She gave a second interview, this time more desperate, trying to control the damage. But now the public knew the whole story, and her tears sounded fake compared to my documented coldness. "My mother is being manipulated by people who only want her money," she insisted, failing to grasp the irony of her own words. The journalist interviewing her, clearly briefed by my PR team, asked precise questions. "Is it true you sued her for mental incapacity? Is it true you demanded power of attorney over all her properties? When was the last time you visited your mother without asking her for money?" Madison could not answer coherently. She contradicted herself 3 times in 10 minutes. Her mask of loving daughter completely fell away when the journalist asked her why she had sold the family story to an entertainment show if she was genuinely concerned about her mother's well-being. Ethan, either smarter or more cowardly, chose not to give any more interviews. He simply vanished from the media map, leaving Madison to drown alone in her own lies. Meanwhile, Teresa and I worked day and night on the foundation plans. We had identified a perfect building in Greenwich Village, an abandoned historic brownstone that, with the right renovations, could house training workshops, legal counseling offices, and community spaces for women needing to rebuild their lives. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Eleanor?" Teresa asked me while we reviewed the architectural plans. "It's a lot of money, millions of dollars. Teresa, for years I invested my money in properties that gave me profits. Now I want to invest in people who give me purpose. Besides," I smiled, looking at the designs of what would be our main center, "it is the best investment I have ever made. I am buying my own freedom." The inauguration of the Mother's Hands Foundation became a national event. Reporters arrived from across the country, feminist policymakers, businesswomen who wanted to support the cause, and hundreds of women who identified with my story. The restored building looked spectacular, with its elegant facade and patios filled with plants that Teresa had personally selected. During my inaugural speech, with Teresa by my side dressed in a chic suit I had given her for the occasion, I felt a satisfaction that no financial gain had ever given me. "This foundation is born from pain, but it exists for hope," I said in front of the cameras and the 500 women who had come to join us. "It is born because I learned that love cannot be bought, that family is not always in the blood, and that a 66-year-old woman can start over if she has the courage to let go of what hurts her." Among the audience, I saw women crying, not from sadness, but from recognition. They were the tears of those who saw themselves reflected in my story, of those who had found validation for their own struggles in my experience. That night, in my renovated home, I had redesigned every space to erase painful memories and create new meanings. I received an unexpected call. It was Charlotte, my 17-year-old granddaughter, Madison's daughter, whom I barely knew because her mother always found excuses not to bring her to visit. "Grandma, I saw your program on TV. Can I come see you?" Her voice sounded shy but determined, like someone who has made an important decision despite fear. "Of course, my love. Come whenever you want." "Tomorrow? It's just, I want to really know you. My mom always told me you were too busy to see me, but now I understand she never wanted us to meet." The next day, Charlotte appeared at my door. She was a younger version of Madison, but with the kind eyes of her grandfather, my late husband. She carried a school backpack and a nervous expression of someone who doesn't know what to expect. "Grandma, did you really do everything they said on TV? Did you really build a fortune all by yourself?" We spent the whole afternoon talking. I showed her my photo albums, my financial documents, the real story of how I had survived and prospered after her grandfather's death. I told her about Teresa, about the foundation, about my plans to travel to Italy. "Grandma, I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to be strong like you." For the first time in months, I shed tears of happiness. My granddaughter, this brave young woman who had defied her mother to meet me, represented the possibility that not all my bloodline was lost. "Charlotte, my darling, you are already strong. You just came here despite what your mom told you. That takes immense courage." That night, while Charlotte slept in the guest room I had prepared with special care, I understood that my story had reached its final chapter, not because I had finished living, but because I had finished fighting ghosts. I had recovered my power, found my purpose, and discovered that true family is built by choice, not by obligation. 6 months after the foundation's inauguration, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. Waking up every morning was no longer an act of survival, but a celebration of possibilities. My house, once silent and heavy with painful memories, now vibrated with the energy of a woman who had found her true purpose. The Mother's Hands Foundation had already served more than 200 women. Every story that arrived at our doors was a mirror of my own experience. Mothers abandoned by ungrateful children, wives betrayed after decades of marriage, older women who had dedicated their entire lives to others and now needed to learn to live for themselves. Teresa had become the executive director, and seeing her flourish in that role filled me with satisfaction that no financial gain had ever matched. The shy woman who cleaned my house was now running workshops, giving interviews to national media, and managing a multi-million-dollar budget with the practical wisdom that only comes from years of managing scarce resources. "Mrs. Eleanor," she told me one afternoon while we reviewed quarterly reports in my new office, a space full of light and plants designed to reflect hope instead of nostalgia. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real, that I am here, directing this thing that is helping so many women. Teresa, my dear, this is more real than anything I've ever done before. And you are not here by chance. You are here because you have a gift that took me 66 years to recognize. You know how to love unconditionally, but you also know how to set boundaries. That combination is very rare." My relationship with Charlotte had become the unexpected gift of this new phase. My granddaughter visited me every Saturday, and together we had developed our own rituals, cooking her great-grandmother's recipes, walking through the downtown area, exploring museums I had forgotten existed, planning her university future away from her mother's toxic influence. "Grandma, when I turn 18, I want to go study business in Italy. Could you help me?" The request touched my heart in complicated ways. Here was my granddaughter asking for exactly what her parents had done for years: financial support for her projects. But there was an abysmal difference in the way she asked. Charlotte did not demand, did not manipulate, did not emotionally blackmail. She simply trusted that her grandmother would want to help her fulfill her dreams. "Of course, my love, but I'm going to help you in a different way. I'm going to teach you how to manage money so you never depend on anyone, not even me." Over the next few months, Charlotte became my student, not just in life, but in finance. I taught her to read bank statements, to understand how investments work, to distinguish between necessary expenses and whims. I wanted to make sure my granddaughter had the tools to build her own economic independence. "The difference between your mother and you," I explained one day while reviewing her youth savings account, "is that she wanted my money to maintain a lifestyle. You want an education to create your own future. That says everything about the kind of person you are." The media success of my story had attracted opportunities I never expected. Publishers wanted to release my autobiography. TV programs invited me as an expert panelist on women and finance topics. Universities asked me to give lectures on female entrepreneurship and personal reinvention after 60. I accepted some of these opportunities, not out of ego, but because every platform was a chance to reach more women who needed to hear that life doesn't end when you are betrayed. But sometimes, that is where it truly begins. During one of these lectures at a prestigious university in Texas, a 22-year-old student asked me a question that stuck with me. "Mrs. Hayes, how do you distinguish between real love and emotional manipulation?" "Real love," I replied after careful thought, "allows you to be free. Manipulation makes you feel guilty for wanting to be free. Real love celebrates your successes. Manipulation turns them into obligations towards others. Real love gives without keeping score. Manipulation always has emotional invoices to collect." That response went viral on social media, and I realized that my personal experience had transformed into something greater, a guide for women of all ages struggling to set healthy boundaries in their family relationships. A year after the trial, I received a letter. Not from my children. They had maintained absolute silence after their media humiliation, but from a notary. Madison and Ethan had attempted one last legal strategy, suing Teresa for tortious interference with expectancy of inheritance and undue influence over an elderly person. I laughed aloud reading the documents. My children had fallen into the trap of thinking that Teresa was as manipulative as they were. They didn't understand that someone could love without a hidden agenda, that someone could care without expecting financial reward. The trial lasted exactly 1 hour. My children's lawyers couldn't present a single piece of evidence of manipulation by Teresa. Instead, my legal team presented 20 years of documents demonstrating the authentic and respectful relationship we had maintained. Salaries paid promptly, generous but not excessive holiday bonuses, total absence of loans or financial favors. "Your Honor," I said during my testimony, "Teresa Ruiz never asked me for money. She never suggested I change my will. She never tried to alienate me from my children. On the contrary, for years she encouraged me to forgive their faults and maintain the family relationship. If anyone is responsible for my children losing their inheritance, it was themselves through their own actions. The judge dismissed the lawsuit and ordered Madison and Ethan to pay the legal costs. It was their final legal humiliation, and apparently also the definitive one. They never tried to contact me again. 2 years after that breakfast that changed my life, I am sitting on the terrace of my new house in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A property I bought because I always wanted to live in a place full of art and culture. Writing these words while Teresa prepares coffee in the kitchen we designed together. My estate, far from diminishing due to my irresponsible spending, had grown. The foundation was not only self-sustaining, but generated revenue through its business training programs. My other investments continued to provide solid returns. My life storybook had become a bestseller, generating considerable monthly royalties. Charlotte visits us every vacation from Madrid, where she is studying business administration on a scholarship she earned on her own merit, though I discreetly covered her living expenses. Seeing her become an independent, self-assured woman gave me more pride than any multi-million-dollar business deal I had closed in my previous life. Grandma, when I finish college, I want to work with you at the foundation. I want to learn how to help other women the way you helped me. That proposal thrilled me more than any corporate success I had achieved. This morning, as I walk the cobblestone streets of Santa Fe, watching local artists paint their works in the plazas, I reflect on what I have learned. It wasn't the money that saved me, although having it gave me options many women don't have. It was the decision to value myself enough to demand respect, even from my own children. The family I built with Teresa, Charlotte, and the hundreds of women who have passed through our foundation is more solid than any bond of blood I have ever had. Because this family is based on mutual choice, genuine respect, and love that does not come with attached emotional invoices. At 68, I am happier than I was at 30, when I believed my worth depended on how much I could give to others. Now I know that my value is inherent, that I deserve love simply for existing, and that it is okay to be generous as long as that generosity is not accompanied by humiliation. If you, woman listening to me, identify with my story, I want you to know this. It is never too late to start over. You are never too old to demand respect. It is never too painful to let go of those who hurt you, because on the other side of that liberation awaits a life truly worth living. Have you lived something similar to my story? Do you know someone who needs to hear that they deserve more than they are receiving? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, leave me your like and subscribe to the channel, because we need these stories to reach those who need them most. The mothers who are buying love with money, the women who have forgotten their own worth, all those who need to remember that sometimes true family is the one we choose, not the one we inherited by chance.